All right, I'm going to start the test review just so we have enough time to finish by 11:55. We should without any problem. So if you have your sheets available and you'd like to take them out, that'd be great. Again, the test is tomorrow, and I believe that next Monday, I don't even remember. Check that out. So again, the test is tomorrow, and the rest of the period will be lab. And then on, I'm sorry. The test is tomorrow, then we're going to go over Chapter 11. So 10 o'clock until 12 will be lab. And next Monday will be lab the entire period. Next Tuesday will be lab the entire period. All right? And then next Wednesday will be the written test for Chapter 11. So sometime in here on Tuesday, we'll have to do that test review also. All right, and I'll mention that stuff again next week. And some of you, again, the idea was that you get this done. I don't want you to go so nuts here that if it's done and it looks like, wow, it's about 98% there, that's real good. All right. And if you've sent me an email in the last few minutes, if you're still having problems, I'll take a look at it as soon as class ends. Okay? All right, so I want that. There we go. Number one was, what is the SDLC? The SDLC is an acronym. It stands for Systems Development Life Cycle. As mentioned, it's used to develop information systems. In the book, at the beginning of the chapter, they showed that 4-step process for creating a systems development lifecycle, 4 or 5 steps. They talked about analysis, and then design, and then implementation, and then maintenance. That was the SDLC. Then they said when you're working on it for a website, and there were more steps involved. So in other words, the one that they used for the website was a derivative of the SDLC, which means it was kind of an offshoot of it. It was based on that, but it wasn't the same thing. All right? Questions on that one? Because I think that might be 2 different questions. I think one of them is, what is the SDLC? And one of them is, how is the, or when you're working on a website, how is the SDLC different? All right, so that's number 1. Number 2, how do you test a website? Well, there's a lot of ways you test a website. Here are 3 of them. You check all of the hyperlinks within the website. You view the website in a variety of different browsers, so not just IE or not just Firefox. Ideally, you look at it in Firefox, you look at it in Chrome, you look at it in Safari, you look at it in Opera, Internet Explorer, etc. And then C, you also view it in a variety of screen resolutions. And this isn't on the test, but just so you know, not just in a variety of browsers, and versions. So this isn't on the test, but you should really look at it not just in a variety of browsers, but in different versions of the same browser. All right, so what I just put in there that's gray, that's not on the test, but it's something you should do as a developer. So it's 3 things. Check all the hyperlinks, because you don't want any broken links. It looks bad, and it's a reason people sometimes leave your site. View it in a wide variety of browsers, in different versions of those browsers, and view it in a variety of different screen resolutions. We did that yesterday when we went over the example for the Wild Wild West thing that we were working on, all right? Because we simulated making the browser more, the window more narrow and more wide. And we did some work with media queries to do that too, if you remember. So that's number 2. Questions on that one? All right, number 3, what does an information architect do? And I think, hold on. Well, that's interesting. And what does a UX designer do? Well, there's an IA, so let's do the other one. In fact, let's see what they said in the book. I've got my own verbiage, but I'm sure that's not what she said. I mean, a UX designer tries to design so that the site looks nice for people and they're oh, it's number 6? Okay, good. Thank you. I'll tell you what, we'll just copy it and we'll look at it twice. How's that? So an information architect defines the site organization, the navigation, and the labeling, where a UX designer focuses on the user experience with the website. That is such a generic definition, all right? Because what I get out of a website won't be the same thing that you get out of a website. We're typically looking at it for different things. Plus, if I'm looking at some kind of a website, let's say a news website, and you're looking at it, we might be looking at it for totally different types of content. Right, but know what an information architect is. I just put the IA there because I was too lazy to type it out. So that's site organization, navigation, and labeling. Know what a UX designer does. That's two different questions. All right. Questions on anything, numbers 1, 2, or 3? Everybody's got that? All right, number 4. This was about 3 or 4 different questions. So just so you know, I just combined them all together. So one question is what happens during the analysis phase. One is what happens during the design phase. One is what happens during the production phase, and one is what happens during the evaluation phase. So during the analysis, notice that's the thing. Here, the key word here is this word. You want to figure out what the site is going to do, not how it's going to do it. So it's a very global picture. You may have heard this already, maybe you haven't, but it's the 35,000 foot view. Remember an old episode of I Love Lucy years ago, all right? Maybe you've never even watched I Love Lucy. I don't know. But years ago, her and Ricky and Fred and Ethel were taking a boat ride someplace. And of course, she missed the boat. So they brought her on a helicopter and they were going to drop her off on the boat. And she was up in the helicopter real high and they said, "Can you see anything down there?" She said, "No, just a bunch of water and that little cigar." And when she got closer, of course, that little cigar was the boat. All right? So the idea, again, with analysis is you're worried about what's going to happen, not how it's going to be done. All right? It's kind of like you're out with your friend, and they're, how are we going to get booze, when you're underage? And no, what you want to do is get booze. It's not how you're going to do it. That's a great thing for me to say with a 20-year-old daughter, All right. So during analysis, what the site will do, not how it will do it. During the design phase, that's when it's actually created. All right? So you actually create, I think one of the questions is, in what phase is the website actually created? That's the design phase. I mentioned yesterday that quite often you come up with different designs just in case you have one and it doesn't work, but that's not on there. During the production phase, well, what are you doing? You're trying to put everything together. So as it says, a web authoring tool is used, the web pages are created, and the web pages are individually tested. Sooner or later, not only do they have to be individually tested, all right, but they have to be tested as a group. Then during the evaluation phase, that's at the end of the cycle, and you say, were our goals met? Or were they not met? There's I don't want to get off on a big tangent, but just so you know, maybe you saw the commercials for it. It's interesting. Tuesday night I watched, there's a new TV show on with, what's his name, Michael Weatherly or Waverly, the guy who was on NCIS. It's called Bull, and I watched it. All right? And the reason I'm saying that is he's an evaluator. He sits in there during a trial, and he can look at people, and based on their way they're sitting, the way they're talking, the way they're doing whatever, he can say, are they believing this or not? So one of the things that he did halfway through the trial is he said, you know what? They don't like the lawyer. He's smug, he's arrogant. So they had his assistant, who was this kind of dorky looking woman who had her hair tied back and big glasses and stuff. They had her take over. All right? So when you evaluate, it's at the end here, and you're saying, did we meet our goals? All right, there's a question about, I don't remember this is one question or two questions. I think it's two. And it's something like, what type of hosting is good for an organization's initial web presence? This sentence might not make a lot of sense to you. In English, what they're saying is, I've got a mom and pop website. All right, I don't think I'm going to have a lot of traffic because let's say I'm selling bakery in Wentzville, Illinois. Unless my bakery is really good, I'm probably not going to have people ordering it from all over the country. I'm probably not going to have people coming in from O'Fallon, for example, because it's too far to drive to just get bakery. So what we're saying is if you've got a small website that you probably don't anticipate there being a lot of traffic on, virtual hosting is appropriate. Remember what virtual hosting is. That's when there's a huge web server and you get your own little piece of it. You're renting it. Okay? On the other hand, if that company goes global and that little Wentzville bakery site is so popular that they open up all over Missouri and then all over the country, then they'd want dedicated hosting. That's when you have your own server or your own servers. And I gave you Amazon as an example of that. Google would be another example of that. So know the difference between, or differences, when you'd use virtual hosting, when you'd use dedicated hosting. Again, virtual, smaller, less traffic, dedicated, larger, enterprise type of thing. All right, number 6. What does a graphic designer do? And again, now we've got what does the UX designer do, so you already have this one. But a graphic designer determines the appropriate graphics on a site, including creating and editing graphics. You may have heard this. There are a lot of schools, I shouldn't say a lot, but there are probably a fair number of schools that provide graphic design degrees. And in there, you would use a package like Photoshop or something similar to that, and you learn how to create your own graphics, etc. So again, you already have the second part. The part you're more concerned with here is the part that's in gray. Some of the stuff that's in here, when I went over the chapter, I kind of glossed over it, maybe didn't even talk about it at all. All right. What is one major difference between Unix, Linux, and Windows? Linux is Unix. It's the free version of Unix. But this is the key thing right here. Linux and Unix treat uppercase and lowercase letters rather differently. Windows does not. So in other words, Unix and Linux, which again is a derivation or a type of Unix, are case sensitive. Windows is not case sensitive. However you want to word that. right, number 8, what is outsourcing? It's a word that as a developer you don't like, because most people associate outsourcing with, oh, people in India, oh, people in China, oh, but it's not necessarily just that. All right, let's say that all of us here work for the same company, and let's say the company decides they're going to go and they're going to use WordPress for their site, and none of us know WordPress. All right, they might hire some work out to an outside developer. That's outsourcing. So it's not just, foreign people, foreign whatever taking over. All right. And I'll give you, while you're writing this down, just very quickly, just a quick little story on this. A guy that used to be on the is on the advisory committee on the school that I used to work at. He works for a smaller company that's in Janesville, Wisconsin. It's called Prent Corporation, but they've expanded. So they have a site in Janesville. They've got one in Flagstaff, Arizona. They've got one in Denmark, and they've got one in Malaysia. All right, and he's been to all the sites. And he said the interesting thing about Malaysia is he can hire somebody there for about $3,000 a year, because the cost of living is totally different over there. That's the good news. The bad news is he's yet to find somebody over there that speaks a lick of English. So it's very hard, and that's some of the problems that you can encounter when you outsource to a foreign company. There was a thing a while back, I don't know if it's still out there on YouTube, but they had this thing where they had somebody from HP in India teaching people who were going to be help desk people for HP, and they were not only teaching them English, but they were teaching them English and to learn it with a southern drawl. So when people called, they would think that these people weren't from India, that they were from Texas. All right. I still remember a guy, and I'm not at all making fun, but I called up one day and I called, it was HP and it was their help. And he goes, "Hello, my name is Brian." And I said, "No, it's not." And he just started laughing. I'm sure he probably heard that before. His name wasn't Brian. All right. All right. What's a service level agreement? It's an agreement between you, the user, and the web host provider. Here's the key thing. It should be read carefully. It's a legal agreement that says what the web hosting place is going to provide for you. Does that make sense? Anybody seen that commercial on TV where there's a lady that comes on and she talks about being in an accident? That's for Allstate or something. And she said, does your policy say this? And she goes, no, your policy says wah, 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 type of an idea. Well, what's in that? Because that's the problem. If you've ever signed up for anything and they say you're agreeing to their legal or their whatever, that's what it is. That's a service level agreement. All right. And you got to watch those too, because a lot of times when you agree to that for a company, what that says is you're giving them your name and you're giving them your website and you're giving them permission to sell your name and your web address to other people. That's how a lot of those places stay in business. That's what they do. All right. Okay, number 10. What's a trademark? Not a copyright, but a trademark. It's something that makes whatever you're working on uniquely yours. It could be a catchphrase. All right. It could be, a symbol. It could be a design, but as it says, it's something that identifies or distinguishes one party from another. So if you're a sports person, whatever, you're some kind of an athlete, and you've got, you're Shaquille O'Neal, and let's just say that he had some kind of a special catchphrase, that would be his trademark. But again, they put in something like this, and they say something like a word, phrase, symbol, or design that identifies or distinguishes one party from another is an example of and you choose trademark. Okay. Why should you register multiple domain names for a website? Okay. You want to prevent cyber squatting. I told you about that before. When somebody buys a name that they think you might want, It can help if the name is hard to spell. So if you've got a company that's called, for example, Smith Brothers or Smith, Smith and Son, Smith and Daughter, whatever it happens to be, you might buy, if you spell it Smythe, you might buy that, plus you might buy Smith, because some people are going to spell it wrong when they put it in. And you buy a multiple domain name and you just have it forward it to the right spelling. All right? Maybe you've done that before. You, instead of going out to Google, you go out to gaggle.com or something like that. And with some of those sites, even if you type it in wrong and you're off by a letter or so, they bought that domain. And it just pushes you off to the right one. All right? Plus, a lot of times if you buy, for instance, if I create a company, let's say I started Amazon, I might not only buy Amazon.com, but if it's available, I might buy Amazon.net, Amazon.org, etc. And again, push people out in case they go to that page by accident or whatever. All right, number 12, is the associated operating system important when you select a web host? Yes, because again, different operating systems allow you to do different things. If you don't know what an operating system is, you're using Windows 10. I always show people like this. Okay, I draw 3 circles. Probably can't tell the difference in color here anyway. Well, that's better. All right, and the circle on the outside, that's the computer. That's the hardware. That's what makes everything go. That's the circle on the inside. The one on the outside is the user. And the circle in the middle is the operating system. So you've ever heard of the person-machine interface? That's what the operating system does. All right, it makes sure that you and the machine can talk to one another in a language or in a way that you can both understand. Finally, the last one is, what is the domain name used for most commercial businesses? That should just make sense to people. It's .com. All right? Anybody need any of those repeated? All right. I'm supposed to show you this. If there's no interest, not a problem. If there is an interest and you want to talk to me or somebody else about it, you can. They're having a food drive at the St. Louis campus, and they would like to have one here. So if you're interested in signing up for it, I'll tell you what I'll do is I'll take this email and I'll forward it to all of you. And if I don't hear anything back, I'll take it there's no interest. It's not a problem. Thank you. All right? So you know what you'll be doing tomorrow. First thing, Chapter 10 written test. Then after that, we're going over Chapter 11. Rest of the period is lab.